What's up, booktubers? Sandy back here with a video, and I'm gonna do a quick little review of a couple of books that I recently read. I don't read as fast as some of you do. I don't read at the pace that maybe I did even a couple of years ago, or for that matter, maybe even a year ago. But sometimes steady wins the race, and I'll talk about that next. So I've talked a little bit about this book, but Did You Hear About Kitty Karr is a book that I recently finished by Crystal Smith Paul, and I really enjoyed this book. It's actually got a nice little comment here from Taylor Jenkins Reid, Intoxicating and Seductive. So I really enjoyed this book. It's about the St. John sisters who are black, and they are left a huge chunk of money from the mysterious Kitty Karr, and they the book, it kind of jumps back and forth between dual timelines, going back and kind of telling the story in the past and then telling the story in the current as they try to unravel the mystery of what happened and why. And I really it was an enjoyable book to read, and getting that historical timeline for those of you who have maybe an attraction to historical fiction. There's a little bit of that here for you, but also if you're really more into the modern timeline, then there's definitely a lot of that in here for you as well, and a mystery angle. But I really enjoyed it. It was I usually, when I have a dual timeline, I'm usually more interested in the current timeline than the historical timeline, and that was the case here too with this book. But at the same time, the historical timeline, there were parts of that that really helped shape the experience even more so than what I expected. And that was something that really got me excited to see how Kitty Karr got from where she started to where she ended, where the St. John sisters, who are wealthy, by the way, who are black and wealthy, and then the sisters have their own kind of a internal sisterly dynamic that plays out, of course, over the course of the book. But I really enjoyed reading it. It was a fun read. I knew there had been a lot of hype about this book, and I think understandably so, because it was really engaging. It was interesting. I really wanted to see how it was going to play out. I kind of had my ideas of how it was going to play out, and to some extent I was correct, but there were also some things that a little bit of a slight curveball there at the end that I was kind of curious about how that was going to work out as the FBI becomes involved in it. It was kind of an interesting turn there toward the end, but I really enjoyed it, so I would definitely recommend this. Of course, good recommendation here by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and if you liked The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, this might be a good book for you to pick up. Just something you might want to consider. Next up for me was The Last Word by Taylor Adams, and I really did enjoy this book. I have had good experiences with Taylor Adams, of course. It started with No Exit. That was the first book I read from Taylor Adams. That was adapted into a movie that I believe came out on Hulu, and that was really good. Of course, the movie was different from the book in a relatively noticeable and significant way, but it probably was for the better, considering it was a movie translation, and the way that the book was written was really good for the book, but maybe from a movie standpoint, I can understand why they did. But to understand what I'm talking about cryptically, you just kind of have to read the book and then watch the movie. But there's a significant difference in the main character's situation that gets her to where she ends up. So I'll just leave it at that, cryptically speaking. Next, Taylor Adams came back with Hairpin Bridge, which was really good, and I did enjoy reading that book as well. And now the latest follow-up is, of course, The Last Word. And what makes this book interesting, and it's probably very appropriate here on BookTube and AuthorTube, in the sense that it has to do with a woman who's living in an isolated location. She makes a negative review about a book, and creepy things end up happening, and it starts to have her questioning who this author really is and what this author could be up to as the pieces start to come together. So you really get a creepy vibe. Again, the isolated situation that really adds to it as well. And so this was a good book. It'll hook you early, and I think it really does a pretty good job of holding your attention all the way through. And so if you've liked No Exit, if you liked Hairpin Bridge, you like that kind of isolated setting with the creepy vibes based on an incident that happened, then Taylor Adams is a book author that you might want to consider reading if you have not already. So The Last Word by Taylor Adams, and that is the last word for this video.